afternoon. Our first speaker is Dr. Mary Roberts, and she's a former Clayton County High School English teacher. And she is currently an associate professor of multicultural education in the Department of Teacher Education at Clayton State. She also serves as the interim director of CSU Center for Academic Success. She is a recipient of the prestigious Jacqueline Jordan Irvine Award for Scholarship in Urban Education and the Clayton County NAACP Freedom Fund Award. In her free time, she likes to read, listen to jazz, write a little poetry, and play with her dog. So please help me welcome Dr. Mary Roberts. Dr. Liesl Eichelberger has dedicated her life's work to the pursuit of knowledge and advocacy for nursing. Her commitment to the profession drove her to advance from RN to PhD from the University of Alabama at Birmingham while working full-time. Currently, she serves as Dean and Professor of the College of Health at Clayton State University. She was selected for an Executive Leadership Fellow at the Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and she is the March of Dimes' most successful Nurse of the Year fundraiser in the United States. She was also the first Georgia nurse appointed to a voting position on a hospital board, and in addition, she is also an author with a textbook that has sold over 30,000 copies worldwide. She is a strong advocate for nursing at many levels, and we are excited to hear her strategies for leadership.
Well, good afternoon, and I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm going to get this on. Here we go. Now, I like to move around. I don't like to stand behind a podium. We don't have a mobile mic here, so I don't think is this one? Yes. Oh, okay, good. All right. So let me get settled here, and let's see if we can do this. Well, good afternoon, and first of all, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk with you about leadership. I enjoy that topic. Actually, I taught leadership and management in the School of Nursing for probably about 10 years, and then I've spoken on that topic to others, primarily nurses. So I'm delighted to have an opportunity to talk to you about it for about the next 15 minutes or so. So, did everybody get a note card or an index card when you came in? Okay, good, because we're going to use those in just a minute. Okay, what I want you to do, I don't think this thing's on. Okay, so what I want you to do is to take out your card, and I want you to think of a great leader. Several probably come to your mind. And I'd like for you to write down the name of that person. 2 or 3 if you want to. We're going to take 2 minutes to do that. And then I want you to jot down 1 or 2 traits of that leader. You know, why do you think they're a good leader? What makes them a good leader or outstanding in your mind? And it could be anybody, and you're not going to have to, you don't have to share this with anybody unless you want to. And then when you're thinking about leadership traits, I'd like for you to identify one or 2 traits that you think that a good leader has, but you don't possess, or you would like to enhance. So write down 2 or 3 leaders, 1 or 2 great leaders, and traits that make them that way. And then a leadership quality that you would like to work on personally. Most everybody has stopped writing, so if you're not finished, you can just continue writing as we go along. So does anybody want to share who they picked? Oh, come on. Go ahead, just yell it out. Dr. Martin Luther King, sure. He's one that always comes to my mind. Those are some that came to mind. You say he was my first one up there. Martin Luther King. Actually, this week, Tuesday, I was in Representative John Lewis's office in Washington, and it's the 51st anniversary of the march from Selma to Selma from Montgomery, and he's the only survivor that spoke with on the mall there in Washington. So I felt real privileged to be there, and he's the only survivor that spoke with Martin Luther King. Anybody else?
I chose Mother Teresa.
You picked Mother Teresa. Well, she was mine too. Okay. Yeah, she was a very different kind of leader from Martin Luther King. She didn't give a lot of speeches. I'm not even sure I ever heard her utter a word, but she was very, very powerful. A very private leader. A very different style from Martin Luther King. Anybody else?
President Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy, absolutely, yeah. He wasn't really on the public stage for that long. I mean, he was only president, for 2 years? But was a transformational leader. And we'll talk about what a transformational leader is. Very inspirational. Martin Luther King was very inspirational. Anybody else? Anybody pick your mother? Or your father? Yeah, they don't have to be nationally known to be a leader. But there are all different kinds of leaders. Fortune magazine every year does a list of the 50 most or the greatest leaders. This year they picked Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and Pope Francis was number 4. Of course, he's the Pope. Last year he was number 1, and he fell to number 4 this year. Taylor Swift made the list this year. She was number 6, and Barack Obama was not even on the list. Now you have to remember, Fortune magazine is a business magazine. But Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, was number 1 last year, and then she fell off this year. So this goes to show you, one year you can be in vogue, and the next year you're out. But anyway, what makes a leader? What did you write down? Good character. Would you say Hitler was a leader? Yeah. Yeah. But good leaders, I mean, he was a leader. I'm not sure we would say he was a good leader, but he did lead a lot of people. But for the most part, I think we would say that we want to follow people who are of good character, certainly. But there are evil people that lead people. Do you think leaders are born or made? Yeah. There is a theory, which we'll talk about in a minute, that says that leaders are born, that there are natural. Have you ever seen people that are just natural born leaders? Yeah. There is a lot to be said from that. Even from if you go out on the playground, if you just watch children on playgrounds, you can spot them. So there are some innate characteristics. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but these are the major prevailing theories. The great man theory, I love that, it means no women allowed. But that was a very early one back in the 1840, where they said that, that they are born, that it was a divine intervention, that these men were chosen for greatness. And that's kind of fallen out of vogue now, obviously, because we have a lot of good women leaders too. But the trait theory is kind of interesting because that says that it's what you look like and what you act like. And the tallest people, and there is something to be said about it. If you look up through history, taller people are more likely to become leaders. But then again, that doesn't mean that short people can't be leaders as well. We know from our own president, he's not very tall, but he's, I think, a very good leader. And they're not the smartest people, but they usually are smart. People usually don't follow dumb people. And they're funny. A lot of them are funny. They're clever, at least, and they usually do have good sense of humor, good personalities. Role theory is just where you play a role. You learn how to be a boss. You study it and you learn roles, and then you play a role. Now, transformational, I mentioned that earlier, where they actually transform, or where they take an organization and completely, y'all remember Lee Iacocca and the Chrysler Corporation, where he went in and completely transformed it. Bezos in Amazon, he has totally transformed the way we do business by ordering something, and now you can get it even the same day. That was a disruptive technology, and he has transformed the whole shipping industry there. But now the thing that is very much in vogue is a servant leader. And that's the person who rolls up their sleeve and does it and works with their employees. And care is very much central to their view of the employee-employer relationship. Mother Teresa is probably the epitome of a servant leader. And it's a very ancient theory, really, and it's written about in the Bible. In St. Mark, talks about that we come to serve, not to be served. And Chick-fil-A, their whole management is built around servant leadership. And it's about caring for your employees. It's not just about what you can do for the organization, but what the organization can do for you. And the belief that a person is going to do the best for the organization if they know that you care about them first. Now, you have to do your job, but it's the belief that you're going to do a better job if you know that I care about you first as a person, that you're not just an object you're working, putting a peg in a hole. And so that's very much in vogue now. So to me, these are my sort of list of the attributes of a good leader. And I'm not going to go, I want you just to read them as I'm talking. Have you ever worked for a bad boss? Yes. Lots of yeses. I hope it's not here in place today. But I have learned an awful lot from bad bosses. And I've learned that, and I've learned what not to do. And if you look at this list, I bet you can look at every one of those and say, my bad boss did the opposite of that. They wanted yes men or yes women around them. They didn't want to hear you to disagree with them. It was their way or no way, or their way or the highway, a lot of times. They didn't have trust. You didn't trust what they said. And that's a terrible environment. Nobody wants to work with them. It was telling you what to do rather than explaining and encouraging you to go along with what they wanted to do. It wasn't about long term. It was day to day. Just get me through the day. And so there was never really any long-range planning. And they certainly weren't humble. Very often they're out for themselves rather than out for the organization. And they don't really deal with conflict in a constructive way. So it doesn't make for much fun to come to work. And they don't really help people deal with their life issues. It's sort of, I don't care what's going on with you. You weren't here on time, or you've been absent too much, or you're being quarrelsome with your fellow employees, rather than, can we talk about these changes I'm seeing? Help me understand what's going on with you. And let's see if we can work together to figure this out. Now, what you wrote down, and the list that we had up there of good attributes for a leader, there are ways that you can develop those. When I've been in the leadership position since my mid-20s, and I never wanted to be a leader. In fact, I have actively tried not to be. And somehow it never worked out. I always got drafted into those positions. And I can remember my first position was an associate director of a school of nursing, and I physically became ill because I was so miserable in that role. And the reason is because, first of all, I'm a people pleaser. I want to make everybody happy. And I am conflict averse. I absolutely hate conflict. I would walk 10 miles around conflict rather than to deal with it. So I had to make a decision. Either I was going to learn how to deal with conflict, or I was going to get out of management. I mean, conflict's everywhere. But in management, I'm sorry, that's most of what I dealt with. And so I had to actively learn how to deal with it. And so I set about a plan to develop that within me. And so whatever you've identified as a skill that you would like to improve, it's so much easier now than it was back, I'm not telling you how old I am, but at least a few decades ago. Because you have all these online resources, there's YouTube, as well as the workshops and courses that you can attend. There's coaching that you can get inside and outside. You can ask someone that maybe is real good at a skill that you want to develop, would you work with me? And most of the time they're very happy to do that. But there's so many resources out on the internet now that the internet, wasn't even around when I was trying to do it. But I think it also helps to write down a plan and set goals if you want to do this. It's okay if you don't want to be a leader. And there are many people that I see so much potential in within the College of Health. And I would love for them to assume a leadership role. And I've asked them and say, no, that's not what I want to do. And that's perfectly fine. Of course, you don't have to have an official title to be a leader. There are formal leaders and there are informal leaders. And so you can lead where you stand. And that's very important, and sometimes even more important. So you all know who are the informal leaders in the organization. So I would encourage you, if you do have something that you want to work on, there are many, many resources to do it. And I'm going to leave you with 3 things. This is Lisa's leadership list. To me, these are the 3 things that I've identified that are absolutely essential to a good leader. And that's, first of all, wisdom. I remember when I was assistant dean at Auburn University many years ago, and this was in my early 30s. The dean had been removed, and so they were going to look for another dean. And she was one of the bad bosses I worked for, that I learned a lot from. And so the director of nursing, the chief nursing officer at Lee County Memorial Hospital said, Lisa, why don't you apply for that position? And I remember very distinctly saying to her, you know, Mavis, I don't have the wisdom it takes to be dean. I realized that it takes a lot of wisdom. There's so much gray. It's not black and white in a deanship or a high administrative position or a lot of leadership positions. Those decisions you have to make. Sometimes I feel like Solomon or Sophie making the choice. So you really need a lot of wisdom. And it's best not to make quick decisions a lot of times, because you really have to gather much evidence and fact before you make some decisions. And they're hard, and you will have a lot of sleepless nights sometimes. But good leaders do the right thing, even when nobody else stands with them. And it can be a lonely place. That's why it was so hard for me as a people person, wanting everybody to like me. Because sometimes nobody likes me. But I've kind of gotten used to that. Then the second thing is you have to have vision. And that's the difference between a leader and a manager. A manager executes the vision that the leader sets. Of course, a leader works with everybody to establish a vision. But then the manager is the one that executes it and carries it out. And sometimes we take people who are really good technically and they can get a lot of things done, and we elevate them into leadership positions, and then they fail because they aren't able to develop and have that visionary view. But they must have vision to see the big picture outside of maybe a small defined area. And then lastly, you've got to have heart. You've got to have passion. You've got to love what you do. You've got to love the people you work with and the organization that you're a part of. Because if you don't, the people that you work with are not going to have it either. And the students or whoever, whatever kind of organization you're in. And I guarantee you that if you have heart and you care about the people that you work with, they will walk through fire with you. And if you don't, they know it. And they're not going to do anything extra for you. They may do their job, but that's it. So I've enjoyed talking with you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have later. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eichelberger. That was great. You were back there writing down some great tips on leadership on the committee. So since my boss couldn't be here, they've now drafted me to fill in a little time, and so you know what I'm going to do, right? The career services, and we always talk about networking, so you're going to have to network today just like our students, okay? So we're not going to make you get up and move around too much. One of the great things that we heard from our surveys after our last professional development series was that people on campus really enjoy getting out of the office and meeting people that they didn't know. And all of you know that we have a lot of new people on campus, so this will be a great opportunity for you to meet someone that possibly you didn't know. I just was noticing in the room to see if people actually sat next to people they work with. And see the people in career services, they know not to do that, so they're okay? But we want to take a few minutes to network. So what I want you to do is, someone near you, okay, it can be behind you, in front of you, on side of you, you choose. You're not, we pay you to play safe, right? But here's what I want you to talk about. That I will lead, okay? So we just heard about characteristics of a good leader, okay? This whole series is about professional development. We want to develop ourselves. So first of all, I need you to introduce yourself. Tell them who you are and where you work, okay? But then second, I want you to talk to them about a characteristic, a professional development characteristic that you feel like you possess and you're great at. One of the things we try to teach people all the time is you got to learn how to brag. What do you do well? You want to focus on the positive first, right? And then we want you to have a conversation with them about something you want to work on. What's the leadership characteristic that you feel like you need more development with, and how you plan to pursue getting that professional development in that area, okay? So again, think about it in terms of strengths and weaknesses, right? Think about something that you do well and something that you want to work on. We're going to take 10 minutes to do that, okay? So that'll give you enough time. As I said, we want you to get some meaning out of this, so we're going to take 10 minutes to do so. Happy networking. Who's willing to share something they feel like they really possess, a great quality that they really are good at? Anybody? Just raise your hand. Yes, ma'am. Hi. Tell us your name and where you work.
My name is Brittany Harrington. I am a travel assistant.
We love it. Absolutely.
One of the skills that I pointed out about myself was my ability to listen.
Okay.
I feel like that is a quality that you must possess in a leadership position. And like Dr. Eichelberg mentioned, if you can gather all the facts and you can listen, you can probably make a better decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you didn't hear her, she said a great quality that she possesses is being able to listen. And all great listeners, as she said, Dr. Eichelberger said, you have to be able to listen. And people know when you're authentic and listening right. I mean, let's be honest. Some of us, in leadership roles, some days we can listen well, and some days it's like, whoo, can we get to the next thing? So let's be intentional. That's one thing about everything that we would talk about as a leadership quality. You need to be intentional with what you're doing, right? That is very good. Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Anybody willing to share something that you want to work on? You need to work on or want to work on in leadership? Yes, ma'am.
In leadership.
Tell us who you are and where you work.
Thank you. My name is Tiffany Burston, and I work for the Department of Campus Life. We're located in the Student Activity Center. And for me personally, I think I want to work on my vocabulary. I want a broader vocabulary. I know how to do that, I just haven't had the time. But just maybe take a word out of the dictionary once a week and learn it and utilize it in sentences. That helps with the vocabulary.
Absolutely, that is great. And I'll just tell you, one way I do that was dictionary.com, just signing up for that text every day. Some days I look at it, and some days I'm like, I don't have time for everything. Some days those words are this long, I'm like, I can't pronounce them. But there's one that immediately came to mind that I know works for me. So, well, you guys have been great. That is absolutely wonderful. And at this point in time, we're going to pull for Dr. Magnus's book. Last three digits, 405. Yay, Kimberly. Absolutely. Good work, too.
Women in leadership we work for.
Great. All right. Alicia's going to introduce our next speaker.
And while Alicia is coming to the stage, I actually wanted to add a tip to broadening your vocabulary. A lot of you all have the same vernacular. You use it all the time. When you are creating your emails or so, just use your thesaurus. Go and get a word that you always use, do the drop down, change the word in. And then before you know it, you'll be changing all the words.
All right, so unfortunately I already read Dr. Roberts' bio, so I won't read it again, but I'll just give you a reminder. She's an associate professor in the multicultural education in the Department of Teacher Education here, and the interim director for the Center for Academic Success. So welcome, Dr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, everyone. As has previously been pointed out, I am a member of the Department of Teacher Education. And teachers all have really loud voices. So let me know if you can hear me, and I'll pick up the microphone, but I'm guessing you can probably hear me. Am I right? Okay, great. So this is what I'd like you to do. And I'd like you to do this now, please. All right, I hear laughter, but I need to see work. I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute. Hurry up. Ladies over here in the back, I need you to remain focused. While you work, I'm just gonna have a seat over here. Raise your hand if you're finished. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, why aren't you finished? I don't understand. So I think it's very important for leaders to know the difference between a dictatorship and leadership. Real leadership looks more like this. It's collaborative. It's not you do it and hurry and get it done. It's let's do it together, right? So in the spirit of working together, I'm going to ask you to do some really simple things for me during this presentation. Is that okay? Yes. Remember you said yes. Remember that. All right. So as Dr. Eichelberger pointed out earlier, we have all had that one boss who feels like they're too good to pitch in and help us do what has to be done. They'll just have us working in the field, working in the ditch, making it happen while they stand on the side and watch. How many of you have had that experience? Yeah. Okay. So there's some essential things that I believe about leadership, but I don't have 30 years of leadership experience. I'm in awe of this. In fact, it's very funny to me that the accident took place at the beginning with the PowerPoint, because I said to Lisa earlier, I don't know why I'm going last. You know a lot more than I do. I should go first. And so when I saw my PowerPoint, I said, yes. And then no, it didn't happen like that. So, yeah. But as I was saying, I'm a brand new leader, so I reflect a lot on my performance. And I also rely on the written and spoken word of other leaders that I admire. And I'm going to share with you today some of my favorite quotes about leadership, along with some of my favorite leaders. As I think about these people, based on what I know of their legacy, I spend so much time studying them that I kind of feel like I know them, right? And so sometimes I pretend like I know what they would say. We know that Teresa is definitely an example of leadership. And I'm going to ask you to do something for me right now. If you agree with the quote that you see on the screen, please stand up. If you agree with the quote on the screen, just stand. Now remember, you had a lot of carbs for lunch. This is good for you. Okay, thank you. Have a seat, please. So there was a lot of agreement with that in the room, and since there was a lot of agreement, I'm going to ask, what does love have to do with leadership? What does love have to do with leadership? You all agree? Someone tell me. Yes, please.
Passion. I think that, like, you like to do something, you love to do something, you have passion, and that is your power and motivation to keep pushing for your goals you want to accomplish. And like, that you don't see it as like a hardship to go to work in the morning. It's actually like
You said that beautifully. I need to say nothing else. Thank you. Very true. So to repeat, if you love what you do, you don't hate going to work in the morning. And if you love what you do, it's evident in the way you do the things you do. So if you're a leader and you love what you do, and that's your work, it's evident in the way that you work with your staff, right? It comes across clearly. And Teresa certainly did love what she does. When asked about how she became a leader, she said she never even planned to be a leader. She said she only wanted to be of help to others and show love in what she did. And she said, hey, if people call that leadership, I guess that's what it is. Because it's just so common to her. She just thinks about it that way. Here's another quote. Give you a moment to look at it and think about it. If you agree with this quote, please stand. Wow, okay, we have a lot of agreement. Thank you. Please have a seat. So the fun part about doing a presentation here at Clayton State is when you have people from your department who you know and you can pick on. So, Diane, please tell us what's important about humanity and leadership. How does this relate for you? You said this, you like this. Why?
Well, if a good leader is somebody who cares about their staff, then a good leader is going to realize that their staff, they're only human,
Yeah.
just like they are,
Yeah.
and that it's, there's prone to mistakes and things like that. And so it won't be a punishment type thing that comes down if a mistake is done. It'll be okay, let's fix this together.
See, my staff is brilliant. That's why I don't really do anything. They make it all happen. Leaders, as Diane just said a moment ago, they respect humanity, the humanness in each of us. Maya was a leader in many ways. However, part of what made her a leader is that she was a lifelong learner, and she understood that there was value in learning from everyone, all of humanity, and she respected all of humanity just for being human. Not for doing anything special, just for being who they were. So I like to think that she may have said something like this. Next quote. I'll give you a moment to look over it. Okay. One more time. If you agree with this quote, please stand. Only if you agree. Only if you agree. Interesting. We have some mixed information on this one. Okay, thank you. Have a seat. Yes, ma'am.
I think of my boss and the position that we are in our department. Oh, thank you so much, I appreciate that. I said, I think of my boss and the position that we're in our department. Clayton State, we have one person to every 3 jobs. So I am inspired to keep working as hard as I do because of the leader that she is. And I respect the mission that she has put out. So because of her, I continue to work with minimal grumbling. If she wasn't who she was and didn't encourage us in the way that she does, I probably would not break my back the way that I do without her.
Indeed. Indeed. It sounds almost like then you agree with this because she is a leader, because she is the kind of leader that she is, you're willing to go the extra mile. And we've all had that experience as well. You have a leader, you have a boss who works for you. They work as hard as you do. And you would feel almost bad not working along with them and not making things happen. And here at Clayton, that is definitely something that's important. I think that's how we always end up being one of the top workplaces, is because we really have great colleagues and we really work for good people. So we allow that to influence the way we behave. However, the point about this quote that I'd like to stress before I move on is this idea of going to a place you would not go by yourself. A leader, a really strong leader, in my estimation, identifies where you can grow if you are working underneath them, and then begins to make that happen. Whatever they have to do they have to encourage you? Do you need some extra training? Does there need to be some kind of internship? What happens? It's important that you lead so that others may follow. Leaders build others so others can build others. And you want to go where they lead. Here, this picture, you probably don't recognize these two ladies, but these two ladies were my PhD advisors, Jacqueline Jordan Irvine and Vanessa Siddle Walker. I admire these two women because they built a legacy of African American scholars at Emory that otherwise may not have existed. And because they led in the way that they led, it trickles down to us, and we continue to do that, each of us who they have touched. And if I'm honest with you, I'm just trying to be like them when I grow up. Really, that's all it is. So I like to think that they would have said something like this. This is the final part of my definition of leadership. Instead of me asking you to stand, if you know what this means, I'm going to ask you to stand if you know who this is. So this is Diane Joyce Humatewa. She was confirmed in 2014 as the first Native American woman and enrolled tribal member to serve as a federal judge. Now, we don't usually keep up with federal judges, so I didn't expect you to know who she was, but just keep her picture in mind, because we're going to talk about that. Remember I said she was the first. What does being the first have to do with leadership? Let's see. I see a hand. I see a hand. Yes, ma'am.
She led the way.
Say it again.
She led the way.
She led the way. Why do leaders have to lead the way? Maybe because they're leaders? That's how that works. Great. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's a foundation that needs to be set, and I feel it's a foundation that needs to be set, and I feel that a first leader is that person who sets the foundation for their employees or the people who they are leading.
Yeah.
So she has set that foundation for many Native Americans to come behind her, just women in general.
Excellent, excellent point. Thank you very much. So leaders are brave because they often have to be the first. And they're unafraid to create solutions. A great example of a leader who's brave and unafraid to create solutions is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. When she entered Harvard Law School, the dean told her he wasn't sure if she could be there because she was taking the place of a man. But she graduated first in her class from Columbia Law School because Harvard wouldn't give a woman a degree. She was recommended for a Supreme Court clerkship at that time when she was in college, when she was young. But being a woman, she wasn't even interviewed. So it's kind of funny how she ended up on the court anyway. She didn't let this stop her because she was brave. Today, she often has to stand against conservative-based decisions on the Supreme Court. But she never bats an eye, and she doesn't mince her words. In fact, she's very famous for the dissents that she writes in these decisions. When they asked her, okay, you're an advocate of women on the Supreme Court, how many women is enough? When do you want, when do we stop? And she said, when all 9 are women. That's when we have enough. And the link between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Diane Humatewa is that she suggested that Diane should be her potential replacement were she ever to leave the court. She's so bad that she has earned herself the name the Notorious RBG. That's literally what people call her. And I like to think she'd say something like this. So I'd like to note the main things that you and I together have agreed upon today. A leader works with you, not above you. A leader loves what they do. A leader respects humanity and is willing to learn. A leader builds others so they can build others. And a leader searches for ways to build consensus and demonstrates bravery. These are things that we've agreed upon here today. And these are all things that I try to do in my leadership role in the CAS. How many of you would like to be led by a person who does these things? Just raise your hand. We all would. And you are. Because as Dr. Eichelberger pointed out earlier, each and every one of us is a leader in our own right. So you're beginning this journey, or you're on this journey, or you've made this journey, and these things are part of who you are. You all agree today. If you look at the definition, and you look at what you said you believe in, and you look at what you do, then you'll know that no matter what, your personal leadership potential is exponential. There's no way you can't explode and be that leader that you intended to become. Thank you.
Linda, I have my first question. This is directed to Lisa. Lisa, how do you operate under leadership that you think is poor?
How do I operate under a leadership that what?
That you think is poor. Poor leadership.
Oh, okay. Well, like I said, I've had the opportunity to work under a couple of leadership regimes, I guess you would say, that were not the best. And the way I looked at it was, there are learning opportunities in every situation. And so I said, what am I going to learn out of this situation? And I also weighed my options. Am I going to stay in that situation, or am I going to leave? And given my personal situation at the time, I felt it was better for me to stay in that situation and make the best out of it. And I tried to work with my boss to, give her, it was a female in both situations. And to be real honest with you, the person never made my individual situation miserable. Had they, I think, directly affected my work, I wouldn't have been able to have tolerated it. But we primarily got along. So for that reason, I was able to stay. But I think you have to, evaluate it on a one-on-one situation, because people stay in jobs for a lot of different situations. I did try to work with them and give them my suggestions, but this is one thing that I have always told, and I truly believe this to my core. If you're working in an institution, you have a responsibility to that institution, to support that institution, and to that boss. And so I tried very hard to support that individual. And at the point that I could no longer tolerate it, then something had to change. Either that boss had to leave or I would leave. Because I've seen individuals work at a place and then they go outside the organization and badmouth their organization or their boss to other people. And whenever I see someone do that, I lose respect for that person. Because I believe that as long as you're working for an organization and you're taking a paycheck from that organization, you should be loyal to that organization. And so when I feel that I've reached a point where I can't support that organization and or that boss, internally you may disagree, but that's where it should stay. And so in one situation, well actually in both situations, that boss was removed. from the position. So, you know, it works out. I mean,
Good.
you know, people know.
Good, good. And to sum that right up, always respect the position, regardless of whether you respect the person or not. Next question.
This one's for Marie. Marie, do you think you can be a leader and not know it?
Is Mary like the virgin, but not quite? I definitely think that you could be a leader and not know it. It's kind of like the conversation that was held earlier about are leaders born or made. I think all of us are born with certain qualities that and proclivities toward certain things. And there are things that make you a good leader that you may have been born with. And it may just not quite be your time for leadership, but when that time emerges, you'll step forth. You'll surprise yourself. I definitely think it's a possibility, if not a probability.
The next question is for you as well. How did you become comfortable in your leadership style?
I'll let you know when I do. I don't know if you're ever comfortable. Well, I'll speak for myself. I don't know if I will ever be comfortable in my leadership role because I feel like once I'm comfortable, I stop asking questions about whether or not I'm effective or whether or not what I'm doing is right. So I will probably always have some level of discomfort with the role, but I think, again, that keeps me a more engaged leader.
Great job. Next one.
Lisa, is there a 1, 2, 3 method to step into leadership?
Not really. But there is a process. Acquiring a new role, there's a definite transition period. And Dr. Roberts kind of touched on this. If you've been, I'm sure some of you have worked for new bosses. And one day they come in and they're very authoritative and they kind of give orders. And then the next day they act in a different way. And you're going, it's a little confusing. It's because they're trying on new roles and they're learning how to be a boss and they're learning how to act in their role. And they're really trying to fit and find out what works for them. And so it's a process of learning what style they're comfortable with and what style works in the organization. So it's a process of learning. And even when a seasoned administrator comes into a new organization, it takes a while for them to learn it. And none of us are ever done, or good leaders never done. You know, you keep growing and learning as you go. So it's a process, but definitely you need to learn yourself and know what you're good at and what you need to work on. And then you need to learn your staff too.
That sounds like a 1, 2, 3. Yes.
We have time for one more question.
Can we take one from the audience? Anyone else that didn't turn in your question? Didn't submit one? All right, Nicole.
All right. You're not interrupting from the audience. These are my questions. Mary, what one thing can we do to enhance our leadership skills?
Let me start by saying I know this isn't fair and I'm sorry, but I think in the development of any new role, the best thing that you can do is volunteer. You can literally volunteer your time stepping forward into a place that you know you want to grow into. If you work under a leader that you admire, spend some time shadowing and or working with or for that individual. If there's a role that you want to embody, spend some time trying to connect with someone who's in that role and then volunteer your time so you can then become close to that individual and begin to find out what goes on with it. I think that even though working for free is never fun, you're not really working for free as long as you're gaining something. So.
Okay.
And can I just say one last thing? When somebody asks you or tells you that you're ready for a leadership position, or asks you, have you ever considered applying for this management position or this leadership position, you need to seriously consider that. Because you may never have, and you think, oh, I don't want to do this, or I'm not ready for this. You're as ready as you're ever going to be. You are in at your period of knowing. Because until you take that leap, you're never going to know if you can do it. And when other people see leadership qualities in you, you may not be aware of it. But if they're seeing it in you, then chances are you possess those qualities. And sometimes we're just not self-aware. But if you're demonstrating them, then you've got them. So you need to trust those people around you that you're ready for that.
Thank you so much. If you would give them another round of applause. And we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge our speakers today, so we definitely have gifts from us to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us. And as women of leaders, of course, we start on time. We consider your time. Your time is valuable, and we want to make sure that we get you out of here on time so that you can go back to your leadership roles and executing and implementing all of those leadership skills, of course, that you have obtained. We thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at our next event. All right? Have a good rest of your day.